that tech could only do good. And, we spoke about this right before we jumped on. But their stories always end, when they conceive of the products they're going to build, they always end with a happy ending. And I think that's just like a big part of why they've gone in this bad direction. Like Amazon, for instance, in the 6 pagers that we talked about, it's always about people that love their products and about how great the products were, but they never really think about the downside. Facebook, so optimistic, and we talked a little bit in the Facebook week about how they've injected some adversarial thinkers into their company, but still, it's not quite the same as having people, dream up the bad stuff that could happen. And the other trend that we saw was that Black Mirror started getting things right in like pretty freaky ways. They dreamed up a social credit score. All of a sudden, China had a social credit score. They dreamed up an insult cartoon bear that would insult people on its way to a second place finish. Turns out the person that the bear won the election, so they didn't dream far enough. And then they also dreamed up this scenario where the Prime Minister of England is forced to have sex with a pig to release the princess. And then there was a report that David Cameron did do that. So now he disputed it. But, it seems to me that like Charlie Brooker, who's the creator of the show, really had a knack for figuring out where things were going. And I thought, I'm talking about all this new technology that's entering the workplace. And everybody that I've spoken about it with has basically had this positive point of view. What would happen if I fed it to a science fiction writer or two with sort of dark, a mind that tends to go to dark places, and maybe we could predict some crazy stuff just by like sitting around over dinner, here in my apartment and dreaming about, the bad places this could lead.
Yeah, I mean, there was that episode with those robot dogs
Mhm.
where they, and so every time I see like a Boston Robotics and they're like, oh, the dog's getting more nimble or, it's getting better at tracking people, it actually it honestly freaks me out.
Yeah, and there was
yeah,
just a video of, I think it was in Singapore, where those dogs are now walking around parks doing facial recognition to see people that aren't social distancing. And there was a video that went around on Twitter about these dogs that sort of showed how scared people were when they approached them. And I was like, holy shit, that is exactly that episode that you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Or, I mean, yesterday I saw somebody had posted a video of a Postmates delivery robot down in West Hollywood. And that's, it's what you could, and I think the beauty of Black Mirror is that it takes something that would normally, or that we've been groomed to admire and appreciate, like technological advancements, and turn that on its head and go back to what we're talking about earlier, and say like, what could go wrong? And like normally when you hear that uttered in a boardroom, it's usually the kiss of death, because inevitably like everything will go wrong. And we always think about things in the positive, from an inspirational standpoint, but I think reality says otherwise. And I think there are a lot of dystopic elements that you don't go to in a lot of the earlier chapters, that if this chapter didn't exist, I would have said, this is like I don't know, this is too optimistic.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's talking about like the success of these companies in the context of the good decisions, or the decisions that they make, not necessarily good. But yeah, I think this was an important addition to the book because of that. And the stories, like I'm waiting for those stories that came up over dinner to come to be real.
Yeah. Well, I do have a story I can tell, which is that we dreamed up another scenario that didn't end up making it in the final edition, which I'm now regretting. But it was about how, Google's employee base, with their, ability to come together and protest. I looked at that combined with the data that Google possesses on individuals. And what if the employees came together and protested to have Google release some sensitive information about an individual? And what if that protest was sparked not by above board employees, but by plants from a government that would go in and rile up the employee base? And the reason why I regret it is because this November, the FBI released a complaint that showed that 2 Twitter employees had actually been going into their systems and accessing private information of Saudi dissidents and passing it back to people with close connections to the Saudi royal family. And I initially glanced over that story, and then I took some vacation over Christmas and New Year's, and I couldn't stop thinking about it because I was like, holy crap, like this is actually, what we were talking about. And I ended up writing like the in-depth story talking about what happened there, and it's totally unbelievable. And you speak to dissidents inside who use these products, and they believe that they were safe because of the secrecy involved, but over time they realized that no, they weren't actually safe. Like it's like could be a pretty big disaster for people. And so yeah, I think we need to really think about, everyone thinks about how could the services that consumers use be used for bad, but the back end systems can equally, can be used for an equal amount of bad, and we should be paying attention to this stuff.
I think that brings up a good question of responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
So who's responsible when things like this happen? Like even when Facebook Live first launched, I mean, that's a pretty famous example, right? Where it's like, great, everyone can just stream and it'll be fine. And people were committing murders or suicide or just like really terrible acts on it. And I think it was because there was this overly optimistic view of all the good things that can happen when people can broadcast instantly. And no one really talked about the bad. Now, in that instance, like, who's responsible? Is Facebook responsible? Are the people streaming responsible? Is the government should the government do anything about it?
Yeah, I would say the responsibility lies on like both the platform and then the people involved. Like we do have this long discussion about the platform problems and blame them a lot, especially me and my fellow tech reporters. But like, there's a people element to it as well. Like, I think we can't, just like, I don't know, it's sort of tough. Like when people commit crimes, we hold them responsible. When people broadcast violence on these platforms, we should also hold them responsible. We can't imagine that these platforms do reflect human nature, and there's a lot of bad in human nature. So we can't imagine that they create this paradise, but they should also, not cause harm and try to mitigate it. So yeah, I think that we blame the platforms, but because they're also like not imaginative at all, which is sort of the point of the Black Mirror chapter. But we have to blame the people that do it as well. And I think that like in this whole conversation of what's wrong with social media, we've let people off the hook. And honestly, some of the bad behavior that actual human beings are putting forth on these platforms is as big of a problem as like the actual design of the platforms themselves.
Going back to like the dissident conversation, right? And again, it's like, if you look at a lot of these companies, businesses are built around data. Data's, whoever holds the most data seems to be like they're the most powerful. There's a lot of there are a lot of investors outside of the United States, some who come from actual like even I guess you could they're not necessarily enemies of the state per se, but they're from countries
Saudi.
that we don't have. Like whether it's Saudi money or Russian money or Chinese money, right? Like there's a significant amount of money in these companies, whether they're private or public, and many of them got wealthy by getting into these companies when they were private. Like Dan Rose from Facebook, tweeted this week about how Yuri Milner put a lot of money in Facebook early on, and I wonder like if any of that that comes home to roost, right, at some point, because clearly it's like you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to draw lines between any of that stuff. And I wonder if that ever came up. It's like, there are certain companies who are, I would say, I don't want to say immune from it, but like you don't hear about that with companies like Microsoft and Apple per se. But you do hear about that from the more newer companies who are really platforms.
Well, I mean, Apple, if you talk about foreign influence, Apple is so reliant on China,
Yeah,
and regularly cows to the Chinese government. So, I mean, look at what happened with the app that Hong Kong protesters used to
right.
spot where police were. They couldn't use it anymore after Apple removed it from the App Store. So, yeah, definitely, the money talks, and foreign influence definitely has a role in the way that these companies operate. And there's more like we talk about the two Saudi guys, or the two guys working for Saudi Arabia. One was Saudi, one was Lebanese. Um, they are, those weren't the only two guys that had a connection with the foreign government in these social platforms. They're just the two that were caught. But I'm sure there's more.
Is that with the addition of new people to boards, for example, like Facebook recently did,
Mm-hmm.
and they did some subtraction too. Um, as much as they're looking for outside opinion on what they should do, are they receptive? Are any of the companies that you profiled as receptive to things that they shouldn't do as well?
Like shouldn't do in terms of.
I mean, at risk of like opening up like a Black
Mhm.
Mirror, for their future.
Um, I mean, I think they're more aware than they let on of like the
Right,
bad things that could happen. There's that great Wall Street Journal story today, this week, where Facebook's own researchers
right,
brought
right.
research to Mark Zuckerberg that said Facebook's algorithm is, so
Mhm.
I forgot exactly what it was, but basically saying catnip to people wanting to preach divisiveness.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything about it. So
One question about that, I mean, this like extremely optimistic view of technology, do you think, and I may be like, jumping here, but like a lot of these, so like Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, Facebook is the only company he's ever worked for. He obviously went to Harvard. I think he had like a pretty protected like life growing up. And
mhm.
so, do you think that diversity would help, like diversity of thought, diversity of background? I mean, it's kind of like there was this Lime scooter, I think it was Lime or Bird, it was one of the many scooter startups where in Oakland, if someone like, couldn't unlock it for some reason, it would like sound a siren and be like, police, police. And people are like, you shouldn't scream that in Oakland, like whatever.
Mhm.
So, and I think it's, partly because there wasn't a lot of, diverse backgrounds or diversity in, the people who are programming that action or that reaction.
Mhm.
Do you think that's the case in tech? Do you think more diversity would help in thinking about all the different ways that things could go south?
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I think so, 100%. I mean, it's a it's like a glaring blind spot for a lot of these tech companies is people come from a certain walk of life,
Yeah.
and people coming from different walks of life and different points of view would definitely help these companies.
I mean, it feels like it comes from a position of privilege of never
Mhm.
having to think about like,
Yeah,
the downfalls,
yeah,
or where people could, misuse things. So
yeah. The other side of it, though, is that like someone like Zuckerberg is a survivalist above everything else. So he doesn't want to have his, he's done a poor job of it up until this point, but he doesn't want his company to be in scandal all the time. He'd much rather just be shipping product.
true.
And then to do that, so he knows that to survive, he does need to bring, those other viewpoints in, whether it's from an altruistic standpoint or from just like a, you know, Machiavellian standpoint. But ultimately, like, I think he's aware that he can't get away with just living in his own bubble forever.
Mhm. And we talked about like who is accountable. So like these companies and these people who are creating these products and, I think the users to some extent. But who would hold them accountable? Like, are they just
Yeah.
self-policing at this point?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the FTC is totally toothless right now. It doesn't have enough money to pursue real action. That's when the FTC published Facebook in the biggest way possible. Facebook held a company all hands and sent out a press release with the video. Generally, when punishments hurts, you don't send out a video in a press release, but that's what they did. They wanted that on local television. It was a victory lap for them that they only got slapped on the wrist. So I think that if we start funding these regulatory bodies, we're going to be in some pretty good shape. But if we don't, then they're going to keep acting in a way that behaves as if they're above the law because that's what they think they are.
I think in the Leader of the Future chapter, maybe even the conclusion that you draw to close out the book, right, which is that the leaders that certainly like employees are going to flock to, and that customers are going to want to flock to, are ones whose decisions are more often than not in the greater interest of society, right? Am I correct with that analysis of what
Yeah, I totally. I think that people are more aware, I think, of the ills in society now than ever before. We see them on Facebook and Twitter every day. And so people make a choice. Do I want to contribute to the bad or do I want to be part of the solution? And
what I think is interesting about that is that most of the companies, not all of them, that you profile here, like almost go out of their way to not tackle like a particular issue, right? They're like, they use issues as a way to demonstrate how good their technology is, right? Or like how good their tools are. So like Facebook will generally not single out a particular issue, but instead say, we are a platform for all fundraisers to fundraise upon, right? And then they'll say like, we can't work with one nonprofit because we work with all nonprofits. And then they use that as a way to say how good their ad targeting is, right? Or like Apple kind of, I'm pretty sure I feel like they walked in, like they backed themselves into the privacy thing. Microsoft, I kind of don't know where they're at with all of it. Obviously, but they've done the carbon positive announcement, which I thought was a big step in the right direction. Yeah. Apple's gone there a little bit, but I just find it interesting that a lot of these companies, like you talk about, like not having any teeth, like there's not a lot of teeth from a societal standpoint. It's a lot of gestural, but not necessarily something systemic or institutional that they're out there to change. Like Jeff Bezos, philanthropic guy, Amazon does some stuff in their communities from a homelessness perspective, but it's like
not enough.
Right. So like, especially in comparison to the size of their, financial carbon, like whatever, all those footprints combined. It's striking to me, like actually, like after reading the book and then you coming to that conclusion, that to me, that was where like there was a big chasm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I am advocating for the type of leader that I want to see in the world. I don't, and I say at the beginning, these are not perfect leaders, for sure not. And I don't want, I don't think that like the point of the book isn't model everything they do. It's me saying, here's what I think leadership should be. And, here's what's worked for them and here's what can work for you. I think we know that ultimately, like they're if they're callous, it will end up biting them. And if they do play a good role in society, it'll be good for them. And, I don't know. I think that like we're starting to see that they can do a lot of good with inside their own products. Amazon and Microsoft can do good making, the hit on smaller businesses a little bit less tough by, giving them credits in terms of cloud services. Facebook and Google can take a proactive role in delivering good, credible information to people at the top of their products. And they've done a good job with that, right? So, and I don't think that we should expect these companies to fix society, like talking about some of the issues that you raised, climate change, for instance. They're not going to do it. And that's why I talk a little bit in the last chapter about the balance between, taxes and philanthropy. That's why I put the question.
Which is such a great point.
And so yeah, I think that the weird thing is that the tech giants have become more like the government than they should be. For instance, in the Bay Area or in California, they were the first to start this work from home trend. Everybody else followed. We haven't had a big outbreak of coronavirus. So this is scary. I mean, why are we in a world where these tech giants have more power and are showing more leadership than our government? Probably two reasons. One is they're so big, we've allowed them to get huge. Two is that our government is doing a poor job, being competent. And these companies.
Would you have asked the same tax question to Jeff Bezos had you had that opportunity?
Oh, hell yes. Yeah, that would be the first question I would ask Jeff Bezos. I mean, Jeff Bezos is his wealth combined, put against the situation for Amazon's workers. Just again, I think displays like a clear lack of empathy inside of Amazon. That gap is gross, and it only points to him capturing all the wealth that's helped that these other workers are helping create. And that's why like people talk about the need to raise taxes. And I don't think they're wrong. And Amazon's fought against that. So I think that's bad and deserves being called out. And yeah, I would say that these guys aren't necessarily model leaders. The point is that their processes are ideal for creating inventive companies. And if people emulate that, they'll be in good shape. But there's definitely plenty to criticize.
I think, should we open it up? I think Hal.
Yeah, let's do it.
Question,
yeah.
And comment and unmute.
What's up, Hal?
Hey, how's it going, Alex?
How's it going?
Hal, look, I read the 3-body problem.
Oh my gosh, there it is.
Yeah,
was it amazing?
Yeah, it was very, very good. I am a physics dummy and I will continue to be one, but the book was very good.
Yeah.
Like if it's good enough for Obama, I think it's good enough for me. So
yeah. That book, #acclaimed. It's awesome. Like you like write another book with like the comments on the back.
Yeah.
Like this is the best book I've ever read. A luminary. This is an awesome book. Another luminary. Anyway, I'm glad you read it. If anyone needs fiction ideas, let me know. There we go. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so I mean, these chapters are so interesting. So it's kind of like the Black Mirror chapter where it's like, more pessimism might be good. And then it's the future chapter thinking about, what can we do to kind of make things better. How do you kind of put those two together in your mind? Like if you were in charge of one of these companies, like let's say you're a Sundar Pichai tomorrow. Let's say you Freaky Friday.
And I'm going to take my stock package and resign.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Okay.
But sorry, go ahead. Let's roll with it. Yeah.
So, let's say you Freaky Friday into Sundar Pichai. He Freaky Fridays into you. And then all of a sudden you are the head of Google.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do in order to, A, bring in sort of the pessimistic view to make an impact, and B, to make sure that Google is set up for being awesome based upon the research you did?
Yeah. I mean, I think that if you try to spot the vulnerabilities in your system, you can still be optimistic. Like you can have adversarial thinkers that help you spot the gaps and then work to fix those gaps and then, think that the future can be better. That's the cool thing about having one of these jobs. It's you have the agency to build the future in terms of, the way that you want to build it. So I think, the first step to recovery is to admit that you have a problem, but then you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I think that they can square with each other for sure.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Hal?
What's that?
What do you think?
What do I think? Oh my gosh. My immediate reaction is they can definitely square with each other. Get that engineer's mindset, get people involved at whatever level they are, and get those ideas flowing to the top. And as long as you've got, we were kind of talking about it earlier, a diversity of life experience and a diversity of views, then you can kind of end up getting some really good, ideas as long as you include those views in the right way.
Yeah.
I mean, one sort of interesting thought I had is, I was talking with someone from, every now and then I'll talk with people from different places. But I was talking with someone from France, and this person was like, okay, not to be a downer, but it was sort of back in March or April when it was kind of like the beginning of the COVID thing, and people were like, what's happening here? And we were talking about situations where Americans would kind of say something like, hey, things are really bad, but I still have my box of Cheerios and like a smile on my face and a roof over my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and the person from France looked at me, and that person was kind of like, when I hear something like that, I just want to say, you know what? Let's be honest. Real talk. This situation sucks. Okay. We can't go outside. This is super bad. Let's just admit that and move forward. So it's just kind of like this really interesting like cultural thing. And I mean, these different points of views out of the 7 billion of us on Earth, they exist. It's just a matter of kind of getting that diversity going and including it in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I kind of think that if I'm on a project and everyone's really, super optimistic about it, that's when I start to think about what did we miss? Right. So that's just a natural sort of thing that these companies need to turn on. Doesn't mean the thing's going to be bad. It can be great. It's just that anticipating those things before they blow up is much better than ignoring them and then having them blow up.
Yeah, totally true. I mean, the one thing that, being in the MBA program that I'm in, that we kind of had to wrap our mind around is the analyst, just different ways of thinking, analyst versus executive. So like school systems, you go through, math, science, English, whatever. You are kind of the analyst. What is Catcher of the Rye all about? What is the theme of this? What is the tone? Or biology? What's going to happen if this petri dish goes over here and you do that to this one, but not to this one, etc. But there's also the executive mindset where you also have to act on that. And it's kind of like,
there was a Steve Jobs clip going around this week, right? When he was speaking at
consultant.
MIT. Yes.
Love that clip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ian. You can talk about
Right.
it.
Which is like basically that if you're a consultant, like you're not actually doing anything. Like you're getting paid to analyze the situation without having to stick around to deal with the results or the outcomes.
As a former consultant, this is true.
And so, and to hear it coming so glibly from Steve Jobs, is absolutely fascinating. And then you realize just how much charm that guy had, to be able to like talk about that to actually a bunch of kids who were training to be consultants at MIT.
Yeah, I loved how he talked about how you really need to feel the pain of not doing what you intended, and then have those, sort of have those scars so you can.
Yeah.
You can.
It's like having. He said it's like having a picture of a banana. I don't know why he didn't say apple, but it's like having a picture of a banana on your wall.
Yeah.
And saying, "Look, I worked so hard on this banana."
Yeah.
And not having any idea about how it tastes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looked like he made that thing up on the spot, by the way. So
that was good. Yeah.
I mean, I would just throw back two pushbacks. One, I used to be a consultant too, but I was a very different kind of a consultant. I was in Washington, a government consultant, and when you're that kind of consultant, you sometimes you get your job because hiring someone if you're in the government sucks. Like it's really hard because of the way the rule goes. So you're basically a back office. So you end up doing work that's really needed, but it's just because of how the system works. So I mean, that's one. It's a little bit complicated. I mean, the other thing that I would say about that is every now and then an outside view is really, really key. Just to give two examples. One, coming from the consumer insights world, like if you want to try to make a difference by going in and doing like an ethnography in a different country, like those people are always coming from someplace else. Like I'd be a terrible ethnographer for America because I'd probably go to my next door neighbor and I'd like assume they eat at Chili's when it's not COVID. And then I go there and it's like, okay, you eat at Chili's and I just miss it. So some of the best ones have that outside view. If I go to Mexico or I go to Panama or something, I can figure it out. So that's one. I mean, another one is, I used to do forecasting. There was a book that came out called Super Forecasting, however many years ago. And I was sort of involved in that research project. And a big concept there is just like inside versus outside views. From an inside perspective, like if I want to talk to you about, the journalism world, you can tell me a million different things about it because you are intimately involved. You know everything about it. On the other hand, you might have some blind spots. Like, I could tell you that, from the outside perspective, the base rate of journalists who, write about tech and go to Substack and succeed is zero. I'm just making that up. But if I
Thank you for the encouragement, Hal.
But if I no, but I'm just saying, like, sometimes the outside perspective. By the way, I have massive support. I've already signed up for your
Thank you. No, I'm just playing.
Thing.
I'm just playing. Yeah.
But anyway, just to push,
say 1%.
Just the Black Mirror version, Alex.
Yeah, it's the yeah. You have to write a story without a happy ending. So thank you, Hal. You've nailed it.
Yeah.
I'm playing.
Anyway, I didn't mean to go on for so long. I know.
Yeah.
No, it is funny though, because I come from the other side. I come from the stereotypical type of consultant where you build a lot of decks and you're like, cool, good luck. Like, let me know when you've implemented it. And so, like, having seen that as a consultant and now being part of a company that hires like large consultancies, it is like that weird double-edged sword, because it's like consultants tend to operate in a very theoretical world, right? A lot of theory, like, hey, if you just did this, then you could do this. And they usually plan things in a vacuum where they don't take into consideration the realities of the company, maybe some baggage, maybe the culture. And so I think that's where kind of the tension lies, in addition to like not being around to really like implement change or really see like the fruits of your labor, good or bad. So that's really interesting.
Can we Ben brought up a story that happened this week that feels very actually like Black Mirror-y to me.
Yeah. Ben, do you want to ask it? I'll unmute him.
Cool.
There we go.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to talk about. I'd love to hear more about like kind of this government big tech kind of collaboration, or just at least this sort of like tension and kind of collaboration that sort of goes on. So yeah, talking about this Amazon example, like basically someone actually compiled all these local news TV stations reciting basically the same script over and over again about how Amazon is so key to reopening the economy and that kind of stuff, and very much shaping the narrative for the poor factory conditions that Amazon actually is running. So yeah, I just want to hear more about that. That feels very Black Mirror, and I'm surprised that didn't kind of go into your chapter, Alex.
Oh yeah, we should have done that. We had a couple swings and misses, obviously, but yeah, I wrote that on Twitter. I wrote that it was gushing propaganda and gross and inexcusable, and I really believe that's the case, both on Amazon's part. Like, they should know better and not seed bullshit into local TV networks that are desperate for content. And the TV networks should know better and not run that garbage. I mean, that is so embarrassing, how they've done that and just gone. Like, earlier in the day, a network anchor posted the script that Amazon sent along and was like, we're not running with this. Like, let our cameras in. Meanwhile, 11 did. Yeah.
I mean, especially after the shit that the family owned network,
Sinclair.
Thank you.
Yeah, just like Sinclair,
yeah, like Sinclair, like, really got dragged for their like all the Boris Epstein. I don't know why I remembered his name and not Sinclair. Yeah. Like all of those like canned propaganda segments, and that's like Sinclair is kind of dyed in the wool, like they do anything. Right. But even like the talent in that case like stepped up, and I guess just like someone an anchor like was a bit of a whistleblower on the local side. Like, I'm surprised like Amazon even tried, especially given that Jay Carney was probably the guy working on that.
Yeah, I mean, their PR operation has embarrassed itself multiple times throughout this pandemic. First, like, trying to single out and discredit the whistleblower. Now this, fighting with journalists. It's a terrible look for them. I don't know. Do you guys have any idea like why they might have decided that it was a good idea to seed out a video like that to the news organizations? Did everybody see this video?
PR. Yeah. No. Okay. Hal hasn't. Yeah, it's basically like
I'll drop a link to it.
yeah, there was a script that Amazon put out to different like local news stations as well as video clips, and it was basically like it seemed like an advertorial, right? It was like,
Yeah.
hey, and it was actually all released and coordinated so that
Mm.
these news segments would air prior to their investor meeting. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've never really worked on like in that kind of PR. So like I honestly don't know if that's normal or not as like a PR pitch. And so then you're kind of like, okay, if that's kind of normal and companies do that, then like is it shame on Amazon or is it shame on, the news stations that ran it?
Yeah. I think plenty
Shareholder
of egg to
communications is
grow
a
at,
filthy
you know,
business.
both sides. Yeah.
Shareholder comms is different than corp comms, and
Yeah.
and it's I don't want to say like dirtier, but it's a little more ruthless because of how closely the messaging is tied to stock price moving, and how coy they have to be, for example, in quiet periods, but still get out a narrative. And so like this feels like it's coming from like shareholder comms as opposed to just traditional like corporate comms.
Yeah.
But I'd also have to imagine corporate comms approved all the stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Anyway, good that you picked on that, Ben. It's absolutely ridiculous. So made me so upset. Like there's people at home watching TV don't know better than this thing was produced by Amazon. So
and James, I think, has a question. He originally was in Shark Tank, and now I'm not quite sure where he is. Article.
That's right.
Are you in
Just
that?
kidding.
Is that Alien?
No, this is
Millennium
definitely
Falcon?
Star Wars. No, that's the one. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
James,
It's,
are you in that
it's good.
spaceship where Jessica Lawrence got trapped for like 100 years with that guy? And she was mad initially, but wasn't so mad after a couple of weeks.
I wouldn't be
Sign
mind
me
to be
up.
trapped in that spaceship with that guy, to be honest. That'd be pretty
seemed
fun.
okay.
It seemed all right.
Yeah.
Hey, it's basically like now being trapped at home, but hey, whatever.
Yeah. How are things going in Australia? And did you get a haircut? That seems so luxurious.
I did. So I got a haircut. So things are opening back up here. Because I think we got 15 new cases in the last 2 days or something. It's like really all amounts now. So everything's starting to open back up, which is cool. Restaurants opened up last week, and they're going to up it to 50 people inside a venue next week as well. So everyone's pretty excited to be able to go to a pub. So we'll see what happens if there's another breakout or anything like that. But so that's nice.
They opened barbershops in California, but not in the Bay Area, but Napa they opened. So maybe I'll take a ride out there because I'm starting to look like a chia pet.
Dude, I've been cutting my own hair.
You've been doing it? Nice. Yeah.
Nice.
I've been holding out because I feel like I could get like a sick fade right now with all the hair on top. Sorry, James, you got a question.
It's fine. It's really interesting to hear how it affects everyone in different ways for all little creature comforts.
Yeah.
So I was so this is a bit esoteric, but I got recommended to read this story called The Machine Stops. Has anyone here read it by any chance? No. Okay, cool. If you Google it, you'll find the PDF. It's a short story, and it's really amazing. It was written in 1909, which is 1909. So it's pre all this stuff. And B, it basically predicts what it's like to live only through a screen like this, technology like this, and not wanting to see anyone and have your life dictated by a machine, which is their code for a big computer, AI, basically, before AI was a thing, right? 1909. So have a read of it. But one of the most interesting parallels is kind of your doomsday story in your book. I've been reading both, and I was reading your doomsday story. I'm like, my God, this is really similar where this whole notion of the software basically dictates your life and tells you what happens with your life. So I guess, one of the interesting things this thing has highlighted is how much software can have an impact on you if you can't see anyone, right? So if you have to do everything from your own room,
or use a computer. It's pretty amazing how the design of all the software we use will have an impact on us, on our daily lives, by the very nature that this is our only interaction is this through this thing. So I was kind of just intrigued. Where did you get the inspiration from? I know you mentioned last week you guys were like brainstorming. Did the Doomsday story come from anything in particular, or was it just kind of came out of your brains?
Oh yeah. I mean, the cool thing about this night was that I had these two amazing thinkers. So Meg Ellison, who's an award-winning science fiction writer, and Wael Ghonim, who helped start the Arab Spring in Egypt, former Google employee who's like seen some of the dark sides of social media. Where, and it's interesting because he was there at a time where we're all like, oh, this is good, and anyway, so we just kind of sat around and I read a bunch of different scenarios out, and they just sort of let their imaginations run wild. And so we just kind of, it was like a writer's room type of thing. It was pretty cool. I've never been involved in anything like that, but I was like, let's come up with like, every fiction story has a setup, conflict, and a resolution. So we said, okay, we'll come up with that. So like the setup was like, Facebook rolls out this bot that's supposed to help people with their mental health. And the conflict was there was an engineer who wanted to, who kind of thought people were being dramatic and turned the bot and had a bad life himself and turned the bot against the people. And the resolution was the bot told all these girls to kill themselves. So, it's just
it's really interesting because I think we're actually going to see a lot more of this stuff where like these like very, very somewhat intelligent bots will have like a big impact on people, especially, if they're younger or if they've got like disabilities and they don't know they don't know any better or they don't know who else to talk to. So like, I think it's very I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but like predictive.
I mean,
it's scary.
Yeah, it's super scary. And I think the thing we talk a lot about the company. And I do think that the biggest threat is going to be rogue employees. They call it the inside threat, which I love the way that that's labeled. But yeah, when I wrote the story about the James, I don't know if you were here for it, but like the people inside Twitter that spied for Saudi Arabia. Yeah. Like all the security people were talking about, oh shit, inside threat,
Yeah. I've always been wondering like why there hasn't been more stories of early Facebook employees that I'm sure have been spying on people that they were into or whatever, right? I know now they've locked it all down, or they at least try to, but like it is pretty crazy. And then recently, just this week, they released information to say they're now going to analyze all conversations on Facebook and even on WhatsApp to see if there's any predatorial behavior. Yeah. And I was like, that's pretty like, so when do you go from like predatorial behavior to like keywords for terrorism to like all sorts of illegal words, right? So if you mention any illegal words, right? And
there's like a knock at your door. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so it's like
crimes.
Say bomb.
I tell my friends on Messenger, I'm like, Facebook can read every single word you're sending to me right now. And they're still like, can it? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like this is why so many people refuse to use it.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but yeah.
Oh, now I'm freaked out.
Not to bring the mood down.
No. But it's funny too because I forget. I may feel like we all live on Twitter, so I forget which tweet this actually was. But it was about like the whole like Bill Gates conspiracy about how he's like using the vaccine to like inject chips into us, and then someone's like, yeah, well, like Facebook can track everything that we do. And so brings it to the question of like how many people like don't know why Facebook is quote unquote free. Like, right. Yeah. Like most people don't know, right? Like if you're not paying for the product, you are the product is something that I've heard before. And so do you think that this, I mean, like obviously with CCPA and GDPR, I mean, people are theoretically more aware of how their data is being used, but like, do you think they realistically know what it means to like give companies like Facebook access to your personal data? I mean, Alex, I don't know if you.
I have a fun story to share. So, of course, over the past 5 years, I've been out here and have spent a lot of time with Facebook employees. One of the most interesting things that I've heard is that when they go back to their towns or go out and meet people, they say, oh, yeah, I work for Facebook. And people don't understand. They're like, what do you mean you work for Facebook? Like, yeah, I work for Facebook. They're like, people work for Facebook. Like, a lot of folks are totally unaware that there is a mechanism and a business behind this thing with tens of thousands of people that are working to build and maintain and support this stuff. So I think that sort of is an indication in terms of the answer of whether you think people have really thought through, why they're used for free. I have another fun story to tell. I'll tell it. So I heard a story of this designer who came to Facebook, gave a speech to the company, and they asked him if he wanted to stay for lunch. And he goes, "Is the food free?" And they said, "Yeah." And he goes, "If the food is free, you're the meal." And he left. So anyway.
Well, he's not wrong, right?
He's not wrong.
It's all designed to keep you inside the building, make you work
Exactly.
more, talk about stuff. Like, there's like, it's the we want to be really nice to our employees, but it's also, oh, by the way, it's like Uber when it's like dinner at 8 p.m. So you stay until 8,
Yeah, I
Alex,
think you guys will realize that throughout the book, I don't really talk at all about free food. I don't talk at all about perks, because to me, it's not what culture's about. So yeah, sorry.
Alex, do you think so Facebook actually made an announcement that they would be letting more employees work from home.
Yeah.
In a feedback culture like that, like is that like, are they set up for success with something like that?
Wait, can you ask that one more time? I unplugged my headphones.
Oh,
also,
sorry. So
your camera quality is so amazing. Do you have like an add-on camera or
He
something?
has an entire Medium article about it. It's really good.
Can you send it to me?
Yeah. I'll put it in the link.
Okay, put it in the chat.
Yeah. So Facebook, made an announcement that they're going to let an increasingly larger number of employees work from home.
Right.
And I'm wondering if like Facebook's culture is set up for that to succeed, right? Because a lot of what you hear about like independent contractor and things like that is just like, that's primarily their point of failure.
Yeah.
So
here's my take on the Facebook news. Facebook is extremely jealous of Twitter. Twitter is in Facebook's head big time. And Facebook is in Twitter's head, though not so much. But Twitter is in Facebook's head like crazy. And I think Facebook saw that Twitter made big news with its everybody can work from home permanently thing, and just wanted to grab the news cycle and made this announcement, which is absurd. Like, we want 50% of people working from home within 10 years. Okay, great. Well, who the fuck knows if we're going to be around in 6 months, let alone 10 years. 10 years, who knows what Facebook's going to be? So Zuckerberg knows that. I mean, he knows it's going to be a very different company in 10 years. So it's a pretty easy prediction to make that no one's going to hold him to. So I think this is literally just Twitter jealousy showing up in a weird way.
He's just mad Jack didn't like his goat.
Yeah. One time I asked, I was with Evan Williams, and I was like, so what do you think about the Zuckerberg quote that you guys drove a clown car into a gold mine? And he didn't answer. He didn't really answer. I had to ask.
I think Hal has one last question about media.
It's all fake news. Very dishonest.
Is that why you're leaving?
Poorly.
Especially newsletters.
Mic drop.
Newsletters are bad. 0% chance of success.
Yes. So my question that I had is, I mean, it sort of goes to the Black Mirror thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's funny if you look at you think about interactions, human interaction as a pyramid, and you look at it 150 years ago, you'd kind of think, okay, there's a big chunk for family, there's a big chunk for community, there's maybe like a tinier chunk for national, because maybe you get a newspaper every once in a while. And there's like an even tinier chunk for international, because I don't know, maybe you're like, if you're in the United States, maybe you're like one of the few people living in New York and not like farming in Iowa or something at that time, because most people were farmers. But now if you look at it, think about it, we are all sort of separated. That thing is kind of flipped. Like how much time you spend with your family, with your local community versus like sort of like a national thing or an international thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, thinking about that and thinking about sort of the long-term opportunity costs and what that could do, One, good, bad. That's my first question. Two, is there some way that a tech company could flip it back? Because I think if that could happen, that could be amazing on a number of different levels. Two questions, good, bad. Could it reflip?
Dangerous, right? I mean, I think I try to get at this in the I love how, first of all, that our conversation tonight has been all Black Mirror, which is fun. I was like, oh, I'll put them together. We'll just talk about leader of the future. Nope. Should have known better. So anyway, in Black Mirror, I talk about the erosion of meaning as something that we should be really afraid of, because people get their meaning from three things: friends and family, work, and religion. And like you talked about, our pyramid has flipped. Our relationships with friends and family have frayed. And there's data to show that loneliness is at an all-time high. Religion, we're seeing more and more people in the US go from like having a religion, and maybe that just means participating with the community, to no religion. I think it's at 22% now, up from like 8% a couple of years ago. And then the last thing is work. And I said in Black Mirror chapter, wouldn't it be terrible if AI automated our jobs and then people lost this last pillar of meaning? Little did I know that a pandemic would come around and, take care of it for the AI. So I do think we need to really focus on our bonds with the smaller group of people. I mean, just the survey on loneliness in the book. Oh, I wish I could grab it. I think, no, that's not it. Somewhere here. But yeah, some of the things that the kids were responding to in this survey about loneliness, like, people are around me, but not with me. It's pretty devastating. And I don't know if a tech company can fix it. I almost feel like we need to have a reemergence of people gathering in their local communities to make that work. But it's definitely a concern. So, and, one of the things that's weirdly, one of the things I think the pandemic might do is make us reconsider what we're spending our time on and who we're spending our time with. I don't know what's happened for me. Like, I just sort of said, whoa, like I've been spending way too much time on career and not enough time, with the small group of people, who are in my tightest, like, close-knit circle. And made a pledge to myself to change that. I think, I don't know, sometimes when you see a deadly move through the world, you remember who's important, what's important, and not be, or not years, well, at least months.
Alex, you broke up a little bit, and I don't want that to be the last that everyone hears from you tonight.
So should we talk until he's there? He is.
Did I freeze?
Yeah, you did.
You're back.
Oh, I had such a good message too. Okay. Anyway, like, long story short, like, yeah, we've not been able to see the people we love. We've not been able to hug them. And maybe that time away, absence makes the heart grow fonder, and maybe we'll reevaluate that and start, inverting that pyramid on our own and rebuilding these relationships. So I hope that's where we end up.
Well, I didn't think we were going to end on a positive note, and yet here we are. So that's great. Thanks, Al, for the assist. So because we were not able to get to the leader of the future this week, we were going to do our reunion show next week. So I think, Alex, if you're okay with it, should we just repurpose next week into leader of the future? Blink twice if yes.
I'm actually hoping that Alex makes it to Napa, gets a haircut, and asks for the MC search from third base fade, which is what every Jewish kid growing up from New York wished they could do.
There he is.
Yeah,
hold
on.
Okay, you'll click. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go, Alex. You're back.
Great. I missed you guys.
Yeah.
Missed you too.
So we're gonna do leader of the future next week, if that's okay with you.
Yeah. Why don't we do leader of the future next week, and then if we decide we want a reunion show, we could do it then.
Yep, sounds great.
Cool.
And then
Cool.
Ian wants you to show up with a fade and just many, many cases of wine from Napa.
From Napa. I mean,
I need you to ask for the MC search, but specifically.
What's the MC search?
MC search from third base. Look it up, Alex. I'm older than you.
Okay. Yeah, I will. I'm a free man as of Tuesday, and we have book club on Wednesday. So I think I'll make the first order of starting my own business, going up and getting a haircut.
Nice. All right. Well,
yeah.
Have fun. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you next week.
See you next week. And Ian, can you send me your Medium article?
Yeah, I did. I put it in the comments. I'll send it to you separately.
It's very expensive. His setup is very expensive.
Yeah, you could do it anywhere between 500 and 2,000. It's your choice.
Well, your setup is like closer to 2,000. It's not.
I had some of the stuff already. Whatever.
Yeah, it's good. I'm ready to drop those G's. Let's make it happen.
All right. You might need to your Substack.
Great.
All right. See you guys soon.